Hello, welcome back. Just a nice, easy one today. We're talking tips and tricks for people just starting out with crochet. I have a decent little list of a bunch of tips that I found a lot of help in. So we'll go through those and that'll be it. My first tip is something that I consider to be a very important tip: ergonomic hooks. If you plan on doing a lot of crocheting, investing in some ergonomic hooks is probably a really good idea because they help with hand and wrist fatigue while you are crocheting. They look like this. A basic crochet hook is all metal or wood, so there's none of the soft rubber cushioning like these have. A lot of them are like silicone. I am currently using the Michaels brand Loops and Threads ergonomic hooks, but there are so many other brands that make them. They can be a little bit pricey, but in my opinion, it is definitely worth the cost. I also have tons of crochet hooks that are not ergonomic like this. I still use them, I still like them, but a big project, I'm always using an ergonomic hook. They are just so much easier on my hand and my wrist. For my next materials tip, using brightly colored worsted weight or acrylic yarn to start is probably the best way to learn and not get frustrated quickly. Using brightly colored yarns that are worsted weight or acrylic make them easier to work with. It's easier to see your stitches. I've been crocheting since I was 8, so I don't have many problems with that anymore. I make plenty of patterns with black yarn. It is difficult to see your stitches when you're using that type of yarn though, so starting off with, I like pastel yarn a lot. Neons are really nice. Just don't start with dark yarn because you will probably get very easily frustrated while you are trying to do that. One more kind of materials tip is patterns. Pinterest has a lot of really nice free patterns. YouTube tutorials are a huge resource of free patterns. I use YouTube tutorials constantly when I learn new crochet patterns or stitches, anything like that. I do sometimes buy crochet patterns, but when you're first starting out, it's not always a great idea to just go out and buy all kinds of patterns. Starting with like basic free patterns is usually your best bet. Okay, now that we've talked about materials a little bit, I'll go into some tips about other parts of crochet. Speaking of patterns, learning to read a crochet pattern is extremely important if you're going to follow patterns that way. There are 2 ways to read a crochet pattern. I'll include some pictures, but there are written patterns, so it's written out in words, and there are what I call picture patterns, where there are symbols for each different type of stitch. It's all like put together in a certain way. You need to be able to read those symbols and understand where you start and end with those if you are going to use those types of patterns. Most of the time, I find those types of patterns in different types of granny squares, sometimes in like more intricate, detailed, like lace is going to be most likely written in that type of pattern. I've seen some other like smaller, more intricate things written that way. Like I make snowflakes, usually around Christmas time, as ornaments. Christmas trees, I've read a pattern that way. There are like the flat decal type things that you can add on to a bigger project are often written in that way. I highly, highly recommend you learn the symbols, the abbreviations, all of that before you really start getting into, there's a big truck going by, getting into reading patterns, using patterns, things like that. Another big thing with when you first start and everything you need to learn, learning the basic stitches is extremely important. Double crochet, single crochet, treble crochet, half double crochet, those are extremely basic stitches. Once you have mastered those, you can start getting into more advanced stitches. A puff stitch is a painful stitch. I don't recommend it. I'm not the biggest fan of puff stitch, but it does come out so well. It looks so cute. There are some other stitches that I use a lot. I use granny stitch a lot. Granny stitch is extremely easy for beginners. It's very basic. I definitely recommend at least starting with granny stitch if you're working your way up to doing more advanced stitches. There are so many out there though, so it can get very confusing. I recommend having a notebook where you write down all of that stuff for yourself. Okay, I have a couple more that I will clump together and then we'll be done. My last tips are, when you are first starting your pattern, they will almost always start with a foundation chain. Using a bigger hook size, like one size up from the hook you need for the pattern, only for your foundation chain, will help to make sure that your stitches are not too tight when you first start off. Tension is a really big thing in crochet, and if you can't have consistent tension, your projects are going to look a little wonky. So using one size bigger crochet hook for your foundation chain can help with that if you are a beginner and you're still trying to master your tension. I also cannot stress enough the importance of weaving in ends when you finish a project. It is time consuming, it's not fun, it's probably the worst part of a project, but it is so important for making sure your project stays together, making sure that it's not going to get ruined in the wash or while somebody is wearing it if it's a wearable. I have oftentimes been a slacker on weaving in my ends, and I always pay for it later. So I definitely recommend making sure you weave in those ends. Last one that I'll leave it off on. My biggest tip is to just start. Just do it. Jump right in, learn it, figure it out. I learned when I was very young from my mother. My mom taught me, and she only taught me the basics, and I pretty much took it and ran. I used YouTube, Pinterest, anywhere on the internet that I could to improve, learn new things, and get better at what I was doing. And now I'm making things that I never would have thought that I could make when I was still that little. So believe in yourself. You can do it. It just takes practice. And that is all I have for today. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you next Monday.